Welcome, everybody. Thank you for giving away some of your time here today to grow professionally and just be around some happy faces. I'm looking around and I'm just excited to see so many people. Congratulations, Rebecca.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
She's the new fed baby, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So congratulations. And I know that we're coming off of a lot of professional development last week. If you were at all part of the CEE conference, I know I feel good that my sessions are done and taken care of there. And now I get to sit back and watch what we do with the election thing today. But this is something we'd like to continue doing as long as there's demand from the membership of Nye to continue to grow and feed into you professionally with some topical things. And again, it's the idea that we need to multiply the multipliers. And this is an opportunity to do that with a nice lesson that you can utilize and I think really customize. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about that toward the end when we have some questions about how to customize it for maybe your own state governor elections to see if the data works out there and some other ways. So I'll definitely have some questions and hopefully you guys will too. And it's not webinar format. Like that's one thing that frustrated me about the CEE conference was I felt so much like I was talking to a screen and I like that. I like, even if I can keep you all on mute, just being able to see your faces, it really changes it. I have my students turn on their video. There's a big dispute, right? Should you have the students turn on their video or not? But we've got teams and they can have virtual backgrounds. They can have blurring. They can do whatever. So I use my economics. I can't necessarily require them, although my principal will back me if I say, hey, I want you to have, your video on. And I thought about, okay, I had the two guys on my shoulder, right? I had the one guy who said, penalize them if they don't. And I had the other one that said, if they do, give them extra credit on the test. So I'm taking screenshots and those who I can see from the neck up are getting extra credit on their test. Figured that incentive might work for them. And if they don't, it doesn't penalize them. So, I'm not going to get called down to the principal's office. So that's how I'm handling that. Although this is how the high schoolers like to do class. This is what they'll typically do. You'll see their forehead like that. But you're going to see all of us today. And I'm going to hand it over so we can learn a little bit more about this wonderful lesson that can be utilized in your classes. And I just need to give you hosting privileges here. So I'm going to go ahead and make you the co-host now. And we should be all set. So hand it over.
Awesome, thank you. All right, let's see first if I get the screen one, screen two thing right, because I usually don't. Let's see. Okay, can you guys see the main screen? Not my notes, but the main PowerPoint? Yes, great. All right. Well, hi, everybody. Thank you so much. Derek asked me to do this presentation. This is a lesson that I've been seeing for many, many, many years, actually, since I've known Dr. Bill Bosshardt and worked alongside him. And a lesson that I even did when I was teaching. I taught for 10.5 years in Florida. I taught AP Macro and Honors Econ and Personal Finance. And so this lesson tied in really nicely because the government teacher and we pretty much had the same kids, the AP government teacher. And so she appreciated it when I covered all the economic stuff. She's like, keep me away from that. And so when I showed this lesson to her and she saw the GDP and all that stuff, she goes, oh, no, honey, I'll leave this to you. And so I was like, okay. So I did find myself having to make time to do the lesson because I taught the macro for a whole year, but, still need to make a little time for it. And I definitely did. And it was very useful. And so just having that, crossing with the government teacher and having that discussion and then she was talking at that time about, well, it was November. So, she was really excited about the election. She had a lot of activities for the kids. This was really great to kind of, tie both our classes together and for them to see the importance of understanding both. It's not that they're separate, but a lot of things in macro tie nicely with her government class. So that worked out well. All right, so before I begin, I'll just say the typical disclaimer. The views expressed in the presentation are our own and not the views are my own and not the views of the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis or the Federal Reserve System. All right. Oh. Okay. So what I like to do is share the elections economics lesson. using presidential elections all the way from Nixon to Trump. And I'll be able to provide this PowerPoint for you if you like it. I can do that. I have to check. I think I can provide in PDF format, but I know I can provide in PDF format for sure. All right, so the lesson is Economic Misery in Presidential Elections. As I mentioned before, Dr. Bill Bosshardt wrote this lesson, and it's a collection of lessons that he has to update every election cycle, pretty much, and they're on Econ EdLink, published with the Council for Economic Education. Oh, sorry. I'm trying to minimize. There we go. Okay. All right. So in the lesson, students are asked to poll a possible voter regarding issues. They're asked to determine an incumbent party and winner from 1960 to now. We want them to review key economic indicators, looking for patterns between indicator changes and election outcomes, and create rules from patterns and test the rules for the predictive process, or for predictive success. One thing I will mention in executing this lesson is that students have to have a knowledge of GDP. While in the lesson it defines it for them, I have found that, I mean, by November, my AP macro students already knew what GDP is, and we've already worked with it a couple of times and obviously discuss it every day. But if they don't have any working knowledge of GDP, it will take much longer to execute the lesson and for them to really appreciate how to use the economic data. So definitely something that I would suggest to any teachers to make sure that they have that. Now, for a government teacher, the way the lesson is written, obviously they'll most likely be able to understand the concept and execute the lesson just fine. But I would try to find a way to make government teachers comfortable with seeing the economic data. All right. So what's the first activity that we assign to the students? Well, the students get activity 1, and it's called the 3 most important issues in a presidential election. So here you would assign the students to collect the information. It can be from anybody that's of voting age. Doesn't necessarily have to be a family member. It can be a neighbor or a friend. And it's not necessarily serving to find out who did you vote for. It's just to ask somebody in general, when an election comes around, what are the 3 main issues that you are worried about or that you're listening out for the candidates to talk about that matter to you the most. So that's the whole point of this. Now, the idea is that once you assign this to students a class or 2 before, and then they come back and then they share with the class, and the teacher lists down, okay, what is it? What are the issues that came up? And what should be coming up is a common theme, the economy. All right, so the economy. So that's the whole idea of kind of collecting this information, is for them to see that regardless of who they talk to or all the different people that are going to be represented in this particular survey, again, the economy is a common issue that they worry about. So this stems from it's the economy stupid, which is a phrase coined by James Carville in 1992, and it's often quoted. And so as you probably remember, Carville is a strategist in Bill Clinton's successful 1992 presidential campaign against the incumbent George H.W. Bush. And so this was a quote that he directed to campaign workers, and it was intended as one of the 3 messages for them to focus on. And as you can see, the others were change versus more of the same, and don't forget healthcare. But the economy stupid is one that really stuck. So you want to start by showing the students some key economic indicators, and first is the unemployment rate, for them to understand what the definition of unemployment and what it is, and the percentage of people in the labor force who are unemployed. Again, when I show this to the government teacher, just, you know, understanding who's in the labor force and what that means, because usually everybody thinks that anybody who's of working age, you know, who has a job, or it's just understanding that general definition of labor force is what they don't maybe not always feel very comfortable with. So definitely providing some advice on how they can explain that really well to their students. The other is the inflation rate. As you can see, it's a percentage increase in the overall price level. And then we have real GDP, the value of all final goods and services produced in a country in a year expressed in terms of constant dollars. So again, terms that we want the students to feel real comfortable with, or to understand how they work and what role they play in deciding elections. And we'll figure that out in just a moment. So there are 2 statistics based on these indicators. It's the misery index, which is the sum of the unemployment rate and the inflation rate, and the growth rate in real GDP per capita, which is the percentage change in real GDP per person. So again, that's another thing we want to make sure that students understand the difference between real GDP per capita and real GDP in general, so that they see how that works when we get to the activity. All right. Now, hopefully at some point, you know, if students are in a government class, depends, but that they have an understanding of what an incumbent party means. And a student may not have yet learned that the incumbent party is the party that currently holds the office. And in 1960, since we're gonna start a little active. Oh, actually, before I move on, sorry, Derek, were we able to send out the activity sheets?
They were sent to everybody earlier today via email. If I'll put in the chat the Google Drive location, if you didn't get them, that you could just go to the Google Drive and get it. Oh, look at Selena, overachiever. I saw you bike riding this weekend too, by the way.
All right, awesome, great. Okay, so there's an activity sheet which we're going to focus on in just a moment, and you'll notice why it's important for the students to have a good understanding of what an incumbent party is and what it means. So let's get to that part there. So if you have those out and ready to go. All right. All right, here we go. So as we start the activity, you'll notice that there's a particular election that we start with, but I'll get to that in just a moment. So continuing my thought here from earlier. So in 1960, since Eisenhower was a Republican, that made Nixon the incumbent party, even though neither candidate was actually an incumbent. So let's move right along to a review of the election winners and which party was the incumbent party. Now, in this part of the lesson, you'll want to pair students up. And I even did this when I did this lesson in the classroom, because it helps, because sometimes, you know, one student may get lost and be like, what do you mean? Where are we getting this information from? And so another student will help kind of bring them back in and be like, no, this is what we're doing. So to have them work together on this works out really well. All right. So in giving instructions to the students about this, I found myself having to be telling the directions real slowly, very clearly, to make sure what we were filling out. Now, it feels a little strange to them because what we're filling out first is going to be the column on the far right. Incumbent party wins or loses, okay? And then circling the candidates. So that's where we're going to start. And then we'll worry about the real GDP per capita growth rule and the misery index rule in just a moment, and explaining what that is. But in this case, we're first going to break it down by the incumbent party wins or loses and the candidates. There's also a sheet of instructions, which probably came in your attachment as well. And that's going to be, it's a worksheet on elections and the economy. So that one also has the directions written very clearly on what students need to do. All right, so if you guys are ready, let's go ahead and work through your election memory. Now for me, the earliest election I remember, because we moved here to the United States, is actually the Clinton and George Bush Sr. election. That's the one that I have the earliest recollection of. Okay, so using your activity 2 worksheet, all right, the first pass through, we're going to review who won and if that person was from the incumbent party. Okay, and again, you'll have all students complete this. All right, so try not to jump ahead. Let's see if you remember. All right, so first we're going to circle Kennedy and L on the incumbent line. And now let's continue to the next election. All right, 1964. All right, we had Johnson and Goldwater. Who was the winner?
Johnson.
Johnson, excellent, yeah, great. Johnson, so after the death of President Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson will go on to run for election, making him the incumbent and the Democratic Party the incumbent winner for this election.
Andrea, one of us is actually old enough to remember this one.
Okay.
The one before that, unfortunately.
Who'd you vote for in that election, Dan?
Well, thanks, Derek.
I don't think he was old enough to vote.
That was funny.
Well, thank you for sharing. This is a fun group. Okay, I like this. Okay. All right.
I can say that when we're across the country like this and there's no possible way of him coming to do anything about it.
Very clever.
There you go. All right, let's go to the next election. All right, the election of 1968. All right, so in 1968, we have Humphrey.
But Johnson was the incumbent party, yes?
For the 64?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, they won. They won.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, next one. Who wins this election? Da, 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 da. Nixon.
Nixon.
Yeah, in this tumultuous year, Johnson chose not to run for re-election, and his VP, Hubert Humphrey, won the Democratic nomination for the incumbent party. George Wallace ran as an independent and garnered 46 electoral votes, and some would say that this was a realigning election, and the New Deal coalition was splintered. Fun facts. All right, so we circle Nixon and L. All right, so for the next one, we've got McGovern and Nixon. All right, so in this case, Nixon was the incumbent president, making the Republican Party the incumbent party, and Nixon won a landslide over Senator George McGovern. So we circle Nixon and W. All right, next we have Carter versus Ford.
Ford.
All right.
No.
No, Carter.
Carter.
Carter, yes. Following the Watergate scandal and President Nixon's resignation, Gerald Ford became the first person to not have been elected to either the vice presidency or presidency to serve as a president and of the incumbent Republican Party. Now, Ford had been the Republican leader in the House of Representatives and sought to heal the nation by pardoning Nixon. Some pundits say that generosity may have cost him the election. And Jimmy Carter, former governor of Georgia, peanut farmer, and U.S. Naval Academy grad, who had commanded nuclear submarines, won. And so we circle Carter and then we place L for the incumbent party losing. Fun fact, Rose Carbone, which is a government teacher I was referring to, she actually made a special trip to Georgia to hear Carter. I think is he a pastor? Sorry, I'm not remembering. I know he gives service in Georgia.
Yeah, he has a Sunday school class that he teaches every Sunday.
That's what it is, a Sunday school class. Thank you. Yes, so she made a special trip to see him speak. All right, so here we are at the 1980 election. We've got Carter, Reagan, and Anderson. Who won this election?
Reagan.
Reagan, you got it. Okay. Carter, the incumbent, was challenged from within his own Democratic Party for the nomination by Ted Kennedy, but held on only to lose in a landslide to Ronald Reagan in what is considered by some to be another realigning election. Now, Reagan, a popular former California governor and movie star, led a conservative shift. Now, John Anderson, a liberal Republican, challenged as an independent candidate after Reagan locked up the Republican nomination. So we've got circled Reagan, and we've got L. All right, 1984 election. All right, who wins this one?
Reagan.
Reagan, you got it. Reagan, the incumbent Republican president, handily defeated Carter's vice president and former senator from Minnesota, Walter Mondale. I hear giggles.
Yeah, Kate says she's finally bored now.
Oh, you're so young.
Yeah.
All right, so this is just an example that you can share with teachers just as we go along, or if you're presenting this virtually, to show them what it should look like so far. In assigning this to students, some of the suggestions, for example, I've been doing some Google lessons for teachers who've been using Google Classroom in Florida, and taking a snapshot of this or saving it as an image on a Google Doc, and then you can have the kids write in LW, or you can provide little images that they can drag and drop and the little ovals for them to circle. That's one way that you could assign this virtually. My sister, she works with Google Classroom. She said you can also save it as a background image on a Google slide, and then create the little shapes, ovals, and the letters for the kids to drag and drop over and save it. So I think this is something that can definitely be done in the virtual environment, and that'd be one way of doing it. Again, most of my familiarity is with Google Classroom, not so much with the other platforms. But if any of you have any other way that you can see that teachers can apply this virtually, then definitely we can share that later on. All right, so there's this. Oh, another thing I'd like to note is that this particular activity, if you look on the Econ EdLink lesson, I'm not sure if they have fixed it yet, but there are some years missing on that sheet. And I think it's the 80s or 81 and on 81, and it skips a couple of years. So definitely check on Econ EdLink, but if you do present this for other educators, I would highly suggest that the copy that Derek sent you, please keep that copy and share that copy, because it's an Econ EdLink. For some reason, when they transferred it over online, it didn't transfer well. I told Dr. Bosshardt, and he says that he's contacted CEE about it.
It's missing 81 through 84.
81 through 84, there you go. Yeah.
Currently. So yeah, don't use the one that's in Econ EdLink right now.
Right, thank you. All right, so let's continue to circle the winners in writing W or L for the incumbent party. All right, 1988, who wins this election?
Bush.
There you go,
You should really change that slide to have Governor Dukakis with that army helmet on and
The
the
tank?
tank or whatever. Yeah. That was actually right down the street from my house, I believe, here in Michigan,
Oh,
at the
really?
tank plant. Yeah.
That would create great conversation in your classroom.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
All
fun fact here, I was a page at the, I don't know if it was in Texas, it was in Houston. I thought it was the Republican National Convention, but I'm not so sure now. It might have just been the Texas convention for Bush that year. I had just graduated from high school, and the representatives from my county, for some reason, asked me to go as a page, and I was always up for an adventure. So I went to that one.
Nice. Awesome. Okay, so next, so who's the incumbent party in 1988? After 8 years of President Reagan, it is the Republican Party. Michael Dukakis, a former governor of Massachusetts, and was no match for Reagan's VP, George Hubert Walker Bush. So again, circle Bush, and we have W. All right. Next, who wins? 1982.
Clinton.
Clinton, that's right. After 12 years in a row, the Republican Party was still the incumbent party in 1992. Ross Perot, a Republican with flip charts, challenged President Bush for the Republican nomination and lost, but ran as an independent. Now, Democrats struggled to find someone willing to take on President Bush, and Bill Clinton, former governor of Arkansas, got the nod from the Democrats. So we circle Clinton and L. Again, so this is the election that I personally remember. Again, we moved here from Colombia. But my father made sure to keep us actively informed of everything going on at the time. I was like, why are you talking about this with me, Dad? Just drop me off at school. But now I really value what he was trying to, the message he was trying to send is to pay attention around you, and especially to everything political, and stay involved and engaged. All right.
This one was read my lips, no new taxes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. And then, and in the lesson, when we start to analyze, when we look at the rule and we start to see, you know, how often the rule did or did not work, when we do the predictions, that is one topic that comes up, and it does stress to explain that to the students as to why George Bush did not win. All right. Next one we have in 1996. Who's the winner?
And
Yes, excellent. Clinton. Now Clinton and the Democratic Party are incumbents being challenged by Republican Senator Bob Dole of Kansas. Dole was a master statesman but lost to Clinton. So we circle Clinton and W and write W. All right, next one, the election of 2000. This is actually the very first election that I was able to vote in. So in this case here, who wins this election?
There's a dispute.
Bush.
Pregnant chat.
Oh no.
By
According
December, we realized it's
to-
Bush.
Okay, yes. So this one is Bush. So Al Gore, as you guys know, served as VP to Clinton for 8 years. So the Democratic Party is the incumbent. After a bout with Dimpled and hanging Chad in Florida, I remember watching all that on the news because I lived in Florida at the time. George Walker Bush, former governor of Texas, became Bush, and he was 43rd. All right, so Bush, and we write L. And I remember from this election, the SNL, Saturday Night Live skits that would make fun of Florida. And I think that was Will Ferrell and somebody else. They did the little singing group, that little church singing group. I don't remember.
Dana Carvey, church ladies.
Yeah, and I think they did a skit about Florida, and oh my gosh, it was hilarious. Was it Sherry O'Terry? I think it was Will Ferrell and Sherry O'Terry who did a skit too. I don't know. Either way. Okay, then we get to 2004. All right, so in this case, let's give it away. Who wins this election?
Bush.
Yes, very good. So Bush wins this election, and the Republicans are the incumbent party in 2004 with George W. Bush and rebuff John Kerry, a senator from Massachusetts. So we circle W. So circle Bush and write W. And I always just, again, so many personal notes here. John Kerry looks so much like my dad. All right, the election of 2008. Again, this was one that SNL also made very entertaining. Let's see, so who won this one? Obama, yes, very good. So Republicans are the incumbent party, and they nominate Senator John McCain from Arizona, and Democrats elect Senator Barack Obama of Illinois. So we obviously circle Obama and write in L. All right, 2012. All right, 2012, who wins this election? Obama, yes, and Democrats in this case again are the incumbent party with President Obama challenged by Republican former governor of Massachusetts, Mitt Romney. Is it true, I have a question for you, is it true that Mitt Romney put his dog in a crate on the roof of his car?
I don't know about that one.
I heard that.
I heard that from somebody and I was like, no way. Okay. So here is what our sheet is looking like as we fill it out. All right, so make sure that yours matches up. And this is something that you could also do if you're doing this interactively with the students, is have a copy that's already filled out and share the results. Now, it is very important for the students to have this information correct before you move into the other activities in this lesson. All right, let's get to the election of 2016. Who won this election?
Republicans, Trump.
Yes, Trump, very good. All right, so Democrats are the incumbent party and nominate former First Lady, Senator from New York, and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and the Republicans nominate Donald Trump, and yes, Trump wins this election, and therefore it is a loss for the incumbent party. All right, and there's the last of our sheet. And now we leave 2020 to mystery. Okay, so an economic rule that does not work very well, and that is a real GDP per capita growth rule. The incumbent party usually wins if the growth rate of real GDP per capita is greater than 0% during the year of the election. While it predicts correctly all of the 7 incumbent wins, it is incorrect on 6 of the 8 losses that were actually registered. It yields a correct prediction for a loss only in 1980 and 2008. And it incorrectly predicts a win for the actual losses in 1960, 68, 76, 92, 2000, and 2016. So overall, the rule correctly predicts only 9 of 15 elections. But let's take a look at a rule that does work well. Now, before you get to this part of the activity though, let me just backtrack a little. In the lesson, what it calls for the students to do is take a look at this rule that doesn't work very well, and then have them work together to take a look at the data. And again, after having some explanation of the data and what's, you know, what these indicators are and what they look like on the sheet and how to understand it and read it. But then you want the students to see that there's a rule that doesn't work, but can they come up with a rule that does work well? So it's not just, you know, handing to the students, here you go, here it is, figure it out, spoon feeding it to them. No, the idea is that they look at the data that they have on their sheet, and once they see a rule that does not work, can they come up with a rule that does work? And once you give the students some time to come up with a rule that works or share their ideas, then you share with them a rule that does work. Now, in the lesson, it does say that if you see that students are having a hard time coming up with a rule, then, you do want to share with them, instead of they're going to be so frustrated, go ahead and share with them this slide that shows the rule that does work well. It can be a little tricky for kids to come up with the rule. I personally always found that the kids that were able to kind of see where we were going with this, or the rule that did work well, I don't know how it is for some of you if you teach or taught AP Econ, but my calculus kids were usually like really ahead of the game when it came to seeing stuff like this, or working with the data, or answering a question like that. But it's a good way to see, and they can see it. All right, so the rule that we're going to work with, and there is a sheet again in one of the sheets that I gave you there with the misery index. I don't know if you can see mine here, but on this sheet is where they're going to record the rule, so that way they remember it. You don't have to keep the slide up the entire time, but you can if you want to. All right, so here a real GDP per capita growth rule is that the incumbent party usually wins if the growth rate of real GDP per capita accelerates, is a higher percentage in the election year than the previous year. And then the misery index rule is if the incumbent party wins if the misery index has not increased from the year prior to the election. Now, in doing this activity, I remember I always had to model a few of them for the students to make sure that they really get it, and that way they don't get lost, because I didn't want them to get frustrated with it. And I really wanted them to enjoy the activity and then kind of be like, ooh, what's it gonna say, who's going to win, to build up some excitement for it. I felt that it was really important for them to understand how the rule worked and how to see it on the activity sheet itself. So again, modeling it for the students, I think, is something that definitely applies to this particular lesson, to make sure that they see it well, and explaining yourself over and over and over again to make sure everybody hears it. All right, so here we go. We're going to use our marked worksheets. So I can just show you guys, or do you guys want to go through a few? Because I have, my next slide is pretty much the first sheet filled out. And we just go through it, I guess?
Yeah.
See it? Okay. All right. So here it is. All right, so keeping the rules in mind, again, incumbent party wins if the GDP per capita is higher in the election year than the year prior, and the incumbent party wins if the misery index is lower in the election year than the year prior. All right, another fun fact you can tell the students if they, in terms of where the misery index came from, it's an Okun, I think that's how you say his name. All right, came up with this misery index rule. All right, so in this case here, we have some arrows, which is helpful in drawing this out for the students. When I was in the classroom, I used to do this under a document camera, or even just project the sheet onto my dry erase board. And that way I definitely drew out the arrows to show this. This actually was put together here. The one who drew this was Eva Johnson, my colleague. So she did this and scanned this in here for us to have as a reference. But again, the arrows definitely do help. And again, modeling it for the students and really breaking it down. So here what we want to see is that the rule is consistent, or that the rule works. So if the incumbent party loses and the two rules stayed the same, then the rule worked for that particular election year. All right, so there's that for that one. I don't want to move too quickly. So I'll notice here. All right, and then here's the next sheet. All right, so again, at the same time while students are completing this, you also want them to at the same time be thinking about what years the rule did not work, whether it's the misery index rule or the real GDP per capita growth rule. And you can have them either put a star next to that particular election year or circle it or whichever, just to kind of highlight it, because it does come up for discussion later in the lesson. Okay, all right, and here's the last years. All right, okay. So we want to recap the rules for the students. All right, make sure that you share that with them. And then again, have them look at the sheet and have them say, okay, well, how often did the rule work? Both rules. So the real GDP rule worked in 12 of the 15 elections. It did not work in 1968, 1976, and 1992. And the misery index worked in 13 of the 15 elections. It missed 76 and 92. And it does give you some information in the lesson that you can share with the students and what happened in 76 and 92. So that way students can kind of understand, or just to give them a little further knowledge about why it didn't work. And it also includes an explanation of what happened, you know, with Nixon, and there was a Watergate scandal and all of those things when it came to the other elections. All right. So let's look. All right, the next part is to fill in the table with the most current data. And I will say this, in the lesson in Econ EdLink, the links to the Fred graphs are not correct, or the codes for the graphs are not correct. So in this presentation, I've provided a slide that I welcome you to share with educators on how to get those graphs correctly. So this is something that Diego helped me put together. I kind of sent him some information and I said, hey, can you double check this? And then he said, no, here are the links. And then I tested them and stuff. So again, you'll want to share, I have a slide in here. That's one that you'll want to share, or maybe write out those instructions so that the teachers have those correctly on there. Okay, so let's put in the data, the latest data that could be pulled up from Fred. And you can point out to the students that in 2019, here's the second lowest annual misery index since 1957. And then let's pull in some current information. So there we have the growth in real GDP per capita, which has dropped as of Q2 of 2020, the unemployment rate, the inflation rate, and the misery index. So this is as of Q2. So I did this lesson a few weeks ago. I would even want to say, actually, no, maybe a month or so ago. And those are the numbers that I have. And as new numbers get released, you'll definitely want to go back in and update those numbers. All right. And here we have that inflation has ticked up. And if it continues, or if unemployment ticks up, what will happen? All right. So according to this, and following the pattern of what we've done in determining if the rules work and using the economic data to make that determination of whether the incumbent party wins or loses, now we will use the latest data to predict whether the incumbent party wins or loses. And so according to this data, what does it tell us, guys? The incumbent party will
Lose.
Lose.
And therefore we have a Biden-Harris.
Wow.
Biden-Harris wins. So we will see what happens. I will say that I have presented this lesson before with Bill Bosshardt. I've let him present it because in some places when we've shown the results, whoa. So I kind of, I tell him, you do this lesson. You go ahead and take it from everyone else. I will tell you that I will share that we did this in New York City in 2016. And when Trump's picture came up, there was a gentleman who was very verbal about his unhappiness about it. And luckily Bill got to say, oh, lunch is here. And so that's definitely something to keep in. That's the only twice that we've experienced something like that. But generally people tend to stay quiet, but we have had that twice somebody be outspoken about it. So, but what I really like about this, going back, what I really like about this lesson is that it ties in so many things that the students learn, and for them to see the importance of what they're learning in both classes, but also that, to me, it got me excited because it was for them to see that being in my macro class, look at how much knowledge they gain and how much of a better voter they are in understanding all these different types of economic indicators. And this is a proof that it does play a very important role in deciding who wins the election, or, you know, because again, they say they vote with their pocketbooks. So it kind of really stresses that and reaffirms it. Okay, so the next slide I have is showing you how to get the Fred data. So again, I recommend that you use this information, and we've also put some instructions there on the bottom, because one of the graphs does You do need to edit the graph in order to get the information, which is on the GDP graph, so that you change the units to a % change from a year ago. So again, I highly recommend that you share this, because on Econ Edling, unfortunately, I don't, again, if this other sheet, Derek confirmed with us, has not been updated, this has probably not been changed on it either.
That bottom part is very important. Like if you're going to maybe look at it for your local community, see if it works for, you know, if I just want to look up Detroit, like is there a correlation between our specific numbers in Detroit, to know to look at % change from a year ago as you're editing that data in Fred, that's important. So I just wanted to highlight that as well, because you want to make sure you're getting the right data.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, for sure. So that's why I also made this slide, because on the lesson itself, I was like, whoa, where is this going? Okay, so you guys know where we house a lot of our resources. Now, while this lesson is on Econ Edling, we don't have this lesson published anywhere on our site or even with Econ Lowdown, but we do, you guys are aware, we have a lot of resources available on our website that you can tie in. You know, we have courses for AP Government in Econ Lowdown. We have course on budgets and, you know, fiscal policy as well. So definitely take a look at that. All right. So again, Econ Lowdown, you can, if you'd like to share with your teachers that in there, we do have lessons that would tie in nicely with this one, or really support or help them get that information. So for example, you could assign some videos to the students or show them some videos on the economic indicators. You have the Economic Lowdown video series that Scott does. There's videos there about all the economic indicators that explain it pretty well through some good animations and examples that are talked through. And those are also available behind the portal. As you guys know, we have Econ Lowdown on Canvas now too. So if you have any districts that are working with Canvas, we have Econ Lowdown there. And of course, please let your teachers know that when, if they want to use Econ Lowdown on Canvas, they definitely need to contact us so that we can take the steps to make that happen. And that's it. I do want to point out a question that was asked when I presented this for the Minnesota Council. Somebody asked if it works for congressional elections. And I asked Dr. Bill Bosshardt about that, if he had looked into if it does work in congressional elections. And he said that it has been researched or done, but it does not work nearly as well, because when congressional elections come up, in terms of people thinking about the economy, they don't really tie that to their congressman. He said it's mostly, you know, with a presidential election that people tend to focus more on their current economic situation. And so that the rule doesn't work very well when it comes to congressional elections. And so there's the lesson. You know, again, if you like to share, Derek, I think you had mentioned sharing of how we could modify this virtually, or if you have any questions, you can open the floor for that.
Yeah, I think that for one of the things I've utilized in my class a lot is Nearpod, trying to make my my classroom more interactive virtually. And I haven't put it together yet in Nearpod, but if I do, I'll share that out to everybody so they could share that with their high school teachers. So that's because I do want to utilize it in my classroom as we get toward the end of October. So probably the sooner the better for everybody else. If I get on that, I'll share the Nearpod, and then you could just share that Nearpod with all of your teachers.
So Derek, why Nearpod and not Pear Deck? I'm just curious.
Honestly, because a lot of the other resources I was seeing were using Nearpod. So at the start of the year, I had to make a decision between Pear Deck and Nearpod, and we're not a Google Classroom school. So that's one reason why I honestly look at Pear Deck when it first began 5, 6, 7 years ago. I was doing training on technology training and utilizing Pear Deck in my classroom that long ago. But so, I mean, I'm a fan of Pear Deck. It's just that more of the resources like NextGen has Nearpods for all of their stuff. So I was like, well, if I'm going to use some of NextGen's Nearpods, I might as well just stay consistent. So they're both good. They're both
Well, that's a good reason. I just don't know Nearpod as well. Can people graph, and can the students graph and you still see all of that?
Yeah, they have a drawing tool, so you could just upload an image in there like a graph, and then they could draw, you could say, okay, well, what's this thing going to do to the demand curve? And then they would have to draw the demand shift to the left or to the right.
Right.
So all the same tools. I don't think there's anything different. They do polls, they do drawing, you can even put in you can kind of make your own ed puzzle now with Nearpod, where you can upload a video, make it interactive, and put questions inside of the video like you do with ed puzzle. So
I don't know. I think that was great. Derek said, in Arizona, I used it in my classroom for years, and I'm not as knowledgeable in Pear Deck about this piece, but we could share our lessons at our school with Nearpod. So our lesson library and our district could share our lessons. So all econ teachers in our district could access, my lesson and add to it. And then the kids' data could be rolled over year to year. So I'm sure Pear Deck probably has something like that, but Nearpod was pretty amazing for that.
Thank you.
I just wanted to mention, I saw some of the comments about the slides. The slides in Econ EdLink don't have the pictures of the presidents and winner and loser, so it's definitely something that I'm happy to share with you. I have another version that doesn't have like the Federal Reserve header and stuff on it, so I can definitely share those other slides with you. So Derek, I'll send you that copy, because that's my personal copy that I've used for a couple of years, if anybody would like that. I think that makes it a little more entertaining too, when you have the pictures side by side of the two.
you send me that file, and I'm going to replace that Dukakis picture, and then we'll send it out.
There you go. Perfect.
Now, one of the things I was thinking of doing, and now I just don't know if it's worth it, because you said for the congressional elections there wasn't as big of a correlation. I wanted to see, and maybe I'll just have the kids do it, see if there's a correlation between our state data and our governor elections. What are your thoughts on that? Just any idea you think it would work?
I bet there'd be a closer correlation there, because the governor, again, is your chief executive of your state. So, it's a similar type office rather than your congressperson. So I would think that there would be a better correlation. But again, who knows? You got to look at the data. But be interesting.
So I know you said congressional elections don't really hold up, but has anyone ever looked into whether you flip the House or flip a Senate, or whether the majority and minority changes depending on the data? That might be something to look at in midterm elections too, because you can then do that on off years when you don't have a presidential election.
That sounds like a great project for a new Federal Reserve employee to research.
There you go.
There you go. Make work for me.
I'm just curious, how many of you are in districts that are still virtual? One, so okay. Oh, wow. Some are mixed. Okay.
Our hybrids are just now starting, or they will be over the next 30 days.
Okay. Just one.
In Arizona, I'm at the council level, so I'm not out of school right now, but we talked to a lot of schools, and a lot of the districts that are just high schools are continuing to stay remote through January. Most of our unified districts that have primary grades are currently either hybrid or transitioning to the back to school model.
Gotcha. Okay.
I am praying daily for kindergarten to go back to face-to-face school, just between me, you, and everybody else on this call in Northern Virginia. But I think DC, especially with the super spreader event that's happening right now, that we're all going to be virtual for a while.
Yeah, my sister, she's in Florida in Palm Beach County, and she's got 6 kids whose parents opted to come in, and then the rest she's doing online. So she has her smart board and she sets her laptop on a desk in front of her smart board, and she's doing both at the same time.
That's horrible. That's horrible because you teach 2 different ways.
Mhm.
And so you're doing a disservice to both groups at that point.
Right. Yeah.
That is what a large number of Arizona teachers are doing, is they might have 20 to 25% that chose to stay home, and then the remainder in the classroom that are all socially distanced as much as possible, but they're
Right.
teaching both simultaneously.
Yeah, she says what's made tricky is in executing a lesson, you know, because she says there's so many things I want to do in class, but then I can't because I can't, you know, keep the other kids just sitting there on the laptop doing nothing. So she says that's been the hardest part, is finding a way to engage both.
That's why I don't mind being online. I honestly feel that it's been a really good experience for my students. You know, yes, we can't do activities. That's kind of, you know, the point of being face-to-face. We can't do the hands-on stuff that we all like to do. So kind of what's the point of being face-to-face? It's not going to change really how I'm instructing. So the students, we think they're great at technology, but they're not really. They're just good consumers of technology. And so now that they're in this situation, I mean, my students are learning the business aspect of technology. They're communicating better. They're messaging me on Schoology. They are learning how to use these business tools very powerfully. Even elementary kids are learning this, and I can't wait to see what they do with these skills that they're learning, even if they go back face-to-face, you know, in the next month or so. They've still learned how to, you know, utilize this technology in a business sense, which I think is a great skill if nothing else comes out of it. You know, plus we've done a lot of cool things where I've brought people in from around the country into my classroom that we might not have done otherwise. I see attendance is better than normal this way, and also missing assignments are lower than they've ever been. So it hasn't been all bad, at least in Michigan where I'm at.
My 5th grader's school email goes to my phone, and so I can see when she's talking in class with her friends, and so I'm able to nip it in the bud quickly. But it's funny, yeah.
Do you see a renewed hopefully more appreciation for teachers in general, or in terms of what they're doing, since parents now are playing part of you know, that role? Or do you guys get that sense, or is it the same?
I've got conferences Thursday. I'll let you know then.
I think it's a mixed bag. I think there are people out there that are slamming teachers for not doing enough and why aren't you doing this for my kid and all that kind of stuff, because they can now look over their child's shoulder and see that, you know, their hand was up wanting to ask a question, but the teacher didn't see it. So I've seen a lot of really negative comments out there. I've also seen the incredibly positive and uplifting stuff too. So I think it's just, you know, we're always going to have that, but I wouldn't say it's gone one way or the other. I think it's just been, both of them have been amplified because of this.
It's more transparent than ever. Absolutely. And I've heard teachers talking about having to remove a parent from a Zoom meeting because they come onto the screen and they want to, you know, criticize at that moment, or, but Scott's right, that it's way more transparent. So the praises are certainly there, but the targeted criticism is a little hurtful.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if there's no other questions, I guess we'll wrap it up. I'm going to put the link to the Drive folder one more time in there in case you didn't get it in the chat and don't want to scroll up through everything. So I'm just going to put that in there right now. Hopefully it links well. Yep. Okay. So we'll get the slides or the PDF version, whatever we gather, we'll put it in that Drive, and I'll send a link out to everybody who was part of the call today, so that you can utilize those tools versus going to the EdLink one that have some issues, obviously. But I think that it's a great lesson. I think it's so many things that you can teach the kids in a topical way. And I thank you so much for sharing it. So if there's,
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And
So
yeah, the other collection of the other lessons that they have, they call it, because in Econ and Link, they have it organized by collections. There's some other really great ones that tie in really nicely. So definitely, I think even doing at least two, this one along with one of the other ones, definitely makes for a nice like week of election material.
and we did record the session, so we'll post that. This is all kind of new to us, how we're doing this with Nye. So we're going to post that link to the session that we did today as well. So that will be somewhere in the Nye site. We'll probably send that out with the email. So if you haven't had a chance to check your email to see the winners of the Nye election, we have Kim Holder will be president following me. So Kim Holder in 2022. And then at large was Amy Hennessy and Mary Claire Pete. Mary Claire's got the 1-year term before that term turns into a 3-year term.
No.
Yeah. Amy Lee is the council rep, and the center rep is Jamie Wagner. So congratulations to them.
Hey. That's awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, you guys have a great rest of your Monday, and thanks so much for the time. Hopefully you felt it was worth it, and we want to feed into you guys, and we know all the people you guys are going to go feed into with this great information. So thank you for all the work you guys do.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks
Bye,
for the files.
everybody. Good
Bye,
to see
everybody.
you all.
Bye.
Hi, everyone.
Take care.